If family is supposed to be sacred, why does it sometimes hurt the most? Before we dive into my story, I'm Maria Blanco, and if you enjoy stories about finding strength when life tests you the most, please subscribe to our channel, Stories for Her, and join our community of remarkable women who refuse to be defined by others. I never thought I'd be starting over at 65. Not after raising 3 children, supporting my husband Manuel through his career, and spending 40 years building what I thought was an unshakable foundation. But life has a way of surprising you, especially when you least expect it. It all started with a phone call from my daughter Rebecca. "Mom, it's me. Just checking in on you. How's everything going?" Rebecca had been calling more regularly since Manuel passed away 2 years ago. At first, I was grateful for the attention. The silence in my house was sometimes unbearable after losing my husband of 43 years. His absence echoed through every room, the empty chair at the dining table, the untouched side of our bed, the reading glasses still sitting on his nightstand.
"I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tending to my garden."
"The roses are blooming beautifully this year." "That's nice, Mom," Rebecca replied, her voice carrying that slightly distracted tone I'd grown accustomed to. I could hear fingers tapping on a keyboard in the background. We chatted about nothing consequential: the weather, her children's activities, a new recipe I'd tried. The kind of surface-level conversation that had become our norm in recent years. There was a time when Rebecca and I shared everything. When she was younger, we'd stay up late drinking tea, laughing and dreaming about her future. Now our conversations felt like perfectly rehearsed scenes in a play neither of us particularly wanted to perform. "Oh, before I forget," Rebecca said, her voice suddenly more focused. "Sophia's ballet recital is coming up, and the costume fee is due. Could you help us out? Things are a bit tight this month with David's startup expenses." This wasn't an unusual request. Since Manuel died, leaving me comfortable but not wealthy, these small financial requests had become increasingly frequent. A few hundred for school activities, 1,000 for car repairs, contributions to family vacations. I wasn't invited to join. "Of course," I said automatically. "How much is it?" $800, Rebecca answered casually, as if asking for lunch money. I nearly choked on my tea. $800? For a costume? It's a prestigious academy, Mom. These things cost money. Plus, there's the professional photography package. We want good memories, don't we? I sighed, knowing I would give in, as I always did. Manuel had always handled our finances, making sure we saved for retirement. Now that responsibility fell to me, and I worried constantly about making our savings last. "I'll transfer the money today," I promised. "You're the best, Mom. I have to run, important meeting." "Love you." "Love you too," I replied, but she had already disconnected. Or so I thought. The line remained open. I could hear rustling, then footsteps and Rebecca's voice again, but with a tone I'd never heard her use when speaking to me. "She fall for it?"
"It was David, my son-in-law."
Rebecca laughed, a harsh sound that made my blood run cold. Hook, line, and sinker. Mom's so predictable. Mention the grandkids, and she's reaching for her checkbook. $800 for a ballet costume? David sounded impressed. That was ambitious. "She is so annoying with all her gardening talk and lonely widow routine, but thank God her money comes handy," Rebecca replied. "My inheritance wasn't meant to sit in her account gathering dust while she lives another 20 years. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, teacup halfway to my lips, heart hammering against my ribs. "What's next on the list?" David asked. "Michael's college tour next month. I figured we could squeeze another 5,000 out of her for that. Then we'll broach the topic of her moving to assisted living. That house is way too valuable to waste on her." "How much do you think we could get for it?" "At least $500,000 in that neighborhood. Once we're managing her finances completely, this gets so much easier." Your mother's too trusting for her own good, David said. Always has been. That's why Dad always handled the money, Rebecca replied with another laugh. He knew she'd give it all away. Speaking of which, I need to call Tyler and Emma to coordinate our approach. Mom's still sitting on that insurance payout, and it's been 2 years. That money should be working for the family, not just sitting in her account. Our Aspen vacation isn't going to pay for itself, David agreed. I must have made a sound, a gasp or whimper, because suddenly there was silence on the line. Hello? Mom? Are you still there? Rebecca's voice changed instantly back to the solicitous daughter I thought I knew. I quietly pressed the end button. Before that fateful phone call, I had been living in a state of suspended grief. Manuel's death had left me adrift in ways I couldn't articulate to my children, who seemed impatient with my mourning. It's been a year, Mom, Tyler had said during a rare visit. Don't you think it's time to start moving on? Dad wouldn't want you moping around. But grief doesn't follow a timetable. Manuel and I had met when we were just 19 students at the same university. I was studying literature. He was pursuing engineering. We literally bumped into each other in the library, my books scattering across the floor. He helped gather them, noted my copy of Pablo Neruda's poetry, and quoted a line from memory. I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where, he said in perfect Spanish, his eyes never leaving mine. I was captivated. For 43 years, we built a life that felt unshakable. 3 children, 6 grandchildren, careers that evolved and sometimes faltered, a home we created room by room, memory by memory. When cancer took him, swiftly and mercilessly, it felt like someone had removed all the oxygen from my world. I went through the motions of living, watering plants, paying bills, attending family events. But inside, I was still sitting in that hospital room, holding his hand as it grew cold, unable to process that our story together had ended. My garden became my solace. Manuel had always handled the lawn, but the flowers were my domain. After his death, I expanded my garden beds, adding more roses, his favorite, and spending hours nurturing each plant. In those quiet moments, hands in the soil, I could almost feel him next to me, offering advice or admiring a particularly vibrant bloom. You're obsessed with that garden, Rebecca had commented during a brief visit. Don't you want to do something more productive with your time? She couldn't understand that each flower that thrived under my care felt like a small victory against the darkness that threatened to engulf me. Every blossom was proof that beauty could still exist in a world without Manuel. Looking back, I can see the warning signs. They appeared gradually, like hairline cracks in a foundation, barely noticeable until the structure begins to crumble. It started with small comments about my spending habits. Mom, do you really need another gardening tool? Don't you have enough already? Emma asked when I mentioned purchasing a special grafting knife. That money could be going toward the grandkids' future, Tyler suggested when I talked about taking a watercolor class at the community center. Each remark carried an underlying message. My resources were not truly mine to use as I wished. My children saw my modest retirement and Manuel's insurance money as a family asset, not as the security blanket we had worked decades to create. Then came the helpful suggestions. Mom, we could set up a joint account, Rebecca offered 6 months after Manuel died. That way I could help manage your bills, make sure everything gets paid on time. I'm managing fine, I assured her. Your father taught me everything I need to know. She exchanged a look with David that I now recognize as frustration at my independence. The financial requests began innocuously enough. Mom, could you help with Sophia's school trip? It's educational, a week in Washington, D.C. studying government. Of course, I said yes. What grandmother wouldn't want to support her grandchild's education? But the requests increased in frequency and amount. A down payment for Tyler's new car. Help with Emma's kitchen renovation. A temporary loan to David for business expenses. I never said no, partly because I wanted to help, but also because saying yes meant phone calls, visits, grateful hugs from grandchildren. It meant still being needed in a world that increasingly seemed to have no place for aging widows. What I didn't realize was that each yes reinforced a dangerous pattern. My children stopped seeing these gifts as generous acts and started viewing them as entitlements. The expressions of gratitude became briefer, then perfunctory, then non-existent. Requests turned into expectations, delivered with thinly veiled impatience if I asked questions or suggested smaller amounts. After hearing Rebecca's true feelings, I spent hours going through our financial records. Manuel had always been meticulous about documentation, keeping everything organized in labeled folders. Now I was grateful for his thoroughness as I calculated exactly how much money I had given my children over the past 2 years. The total shocked me, nearly $75,000. Not in large lump sums that would have raised red flags, but in a steady stream of emergencies, opportunities, and necessities that cumulatively had eroded nearly a third of what Manuel had left to secure my future. More disturbing than the amount was the pattern. The requests had increased in both frequency and size, with less time between asking and less detail about the purpose. It was as if they were testing boundaries, seeing how much they could extract with minimal explanation. When I called Elena the next day, her response was immediate and firm.
This stops now, Maria.
Today. Her office was warm and inviting, with framed photos of her own family and credentials that spoke to her decades of experience in elder law. She listened without interruption as I detailed everything I discovered, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. "What you're describing is textbook financial exploitation," she said when I finished. "The incremental increase in demands, the emotional manipulation, the discussion of putting you in a care facility to access your home equity, these are classic patterns." "But they're my children," I protested weakly, still struggling to reconcile the loving family I thought we were with the calculating group revealed by that accidental eavesdropping. "Which makes it all the more insidious," Elena replied gently. "Family exploitation is both the most common and the least reported form of elder abuse because of exactly what you're feeling right now: disbelief, shame, and fear of losing your relationship with them." She leaned forward, her expression compassionate but firm. "Maria, would Manuel want you to be treated this way? Would he want the money he worked so hard to leave for your security to be drained for vacations and luxuries while you worry about your future?" The mention of Manuel's wishes clarified everything. He had been protective of me until the end, concerned about how I would manage financially without him. His last coherent conversation with me had been about ensuring I would be taken care of. "Promise me you won't let anyone take advantage of your generous heart," he had whispered, his hand squeezing mine with surprising strength given how old he was. "Not even the kids. They have their own lives, their own responsibilities. This money is for you," I had promised, not fully understanding what he meant at the time. Now his words seemed prophetic. "What do I need to do?" I asked Elena, straightening my shoulders. She outlined a comprehensive plan. New bank accounts at a different financial institution, a revocable living trust with clear provisions for my care, updated powers of attorney naming Elena rather than my children as my financial advocate if I became incapacitated, and a carefully structured will that would still provide for my grandchildren's education, but with strict controls. "What about my house?" I asked. Rebecca mentioned they were planning to have me sign it over or move to assisted living. Elena's expression darkened. "That's a common tactic in these situations. The family home is often the largest asset, and getting an elder to downsize can be the first step in accessing that equity. Do you want to stay in your home?" I considered the question seriously. The house had been perfect when we were raising 3 children, hosting family gatherings, and accommodating Manuel's home office. But now, Rattling around in all that space felt less like comfort and more like being lost in the artifacts of a life that no longer existed. I don't think so, I admitted. But I want to decide where and how I live, not be pushed into something for their convenience. Then we'll make that part of our plan too, Elena assured me. On your terms, with your interests protected. The meeting I requested with all 3 children was set for neutral territory, a private room at Elena's law office. I arrived early, heart pounding, rehearsing what I would say. Rebecca arrived first, tension evident in her rigid posture. Tyler and Emma came together, exchanging confused glances when they saw the formal setting. None of them had brought their spouses, which was a small mercy. Thank you for coming, I began once everyone was seated around the conference table. Elena sat slightly behind me, a silent but reassuring presence. I've asked for this meeting because we need to have an honest conversation about our family dynamics, particularly regarding financial matters. Rebecca immediately launched into defense mode. Mom, if this is about that phone call I've already tried to explain, I held up my hand, surprising myself with my own authority. This isn't just about one phone call, though that was certainly illuminating. This is about a pattern that's developed since your father died. I placed 3 folders on the table, one in front of each of them. These contain detailed records of every financial transaction between us over the past 2 years. The total amount is substantial. They glanced at the documents, discomfort evident in their expressions. I'm not asking for repayment, I continued. I gave freely, albeit without full awareness of how my generosity was being perceived. What I am asking for is honesty about your intentions and respect for my autonomy going forward. Tyler tried next. Mom, we've only ever wanted what's best for you. If we've been concerned about your finances, it's because we care about your security. Is that why you and Emma discussed putting me in somewhere affordable once you got control of my house? I asked quietly. Is that why Rebecca and David planned an Aspen vacation using what they called my inheritance? Their faces registered shock, not at the content of these conversations, I realized, but at the fact that I knew about them. We were just talking, Emma said dismissively. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're stressed. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But words reveal thoughts, and thoughts eventually become actions. I need you all to understand some changes I've made. I explained the new financial arrangements, not in detail, but enough for them to understand that unilateral access to my resources was no longer possible. I outlined my decision to sell the house and my plans for my future living situation. You can't just cut us off, Rebecca protested, anger replacing her initial defensiveness. We're your family, your only family. I'm not cutting you off as my family, I corrected. I'm establishing healthy boundaries around my finances. There's a difference. So what now? Tyler asked, his expression unreadable. You don't trust us anymore? We're just supposed to pretend this conversation never happened and go back to Sunday dinners. Trust is rebuilt through actions, not words, I replied. I'm hoping we can find a way forward that includes honesty and mutual respect. But that requires acknowledgement of what's happened and a commitment to change. The room fell silent. I looked at each of my children, really looked at them, seeing not just the adults they had become, but glimpses of the children they had been. Rebecca with her fierce independence, so like Manuel. Tyler with his quiet thoughtfulness. Emma with her creative spirit. I love you all, I said finally, my voice catching despite my determination to remain composed. That hasn't changed and won't change. But love without respect isn't healthy for any of us. The meeting ended without resolution. No tearful reconciliations, no promises to do better. Just 3 stunned adult children and their mother, navigating a painful new reality. Selling the family home was both practical and symbolic. The practical aspects were straightforward. The house was too large. required too much maintenance, and carried property taxes that strained my budget. The emotional aspects were more complex. Every corner held memories. The height marks on the kitchen doorframe tracking my children's growth. The den where Manuel and I would read together on Sunday afternoons. The backyard where we had hosted countless birthday parties, graduation celebrations, and summer barbecues. Lisa, my realtor, was close to my age and specialized in helping seniors downsize. She approached the process with sensitivity I deeply appreciated. Take only what brings you joy or serves a practical purpose, she advised as we walked through each room. This is your opportunity to curate your life going forward. Room by room, I sorted through decades of accumulated possessions. Some decisions were easy. Kitchenware I rarely used, furniture too large for a condo, duplicate tools and appliances. Others were agonizing. Manuel's collections, family heirlooms, children's artwork preserved for decades. For these more difficult items, I created a system. Each child would have the opportunity to claim meaningful pieces. What remained would be photographed, then either sold, donated, or discarded depending on its value and condition. I expected my children to participate eagerly in this distribution of family treasures. Instead, their response was tepid. Rebecca took some of her father's books and a small painting we had purchased in Mexico. Tyler claimed Manuel's watch and some tools. Emma didn't respond to my invitation at all. It was Carlos, my neighbor of 15 years, who helped me pack most of the house. A retired postal worker with boundless energy, he spent weekends wrapping dishware in newspaper and disassembling furniture. My mother went through something similar, he explained when I tried to pay him for his help. My sister tried to get power of attorney after Dad died, wanted to sell the house out from under Mom. I know how it feels to see family act this way. His kindness was a balm during a painful process, a reminder that goodness existed outside my fractured family circle. The house sold quickly. A young couple with twin toddlers who fell in love with the spacious yard and school district. Watching them explore what would soon be their home, the father lifting one of the children to peek out of an upstairs window, I felt a sense of rightness. This house deserved to be filled with a growing family, with noise and activity and new memories. My condo was everything the house wasn't. Compact, modern, low maintenance. The building offered security I hadn't realized I wanted until I had it. A doorman, secure parking, neighbors within earshot if I needed help. The process of arranging my carefully selected possessions in this new space was unexpectedly satisfying. Each item had earned its place, either through beauty, function, or significant emotional connection. Nothing was there by default or neglect. I converted the second bedroom into a studio, installing proper lighting and storage for art supplies. The small balcony became a container garden, with herbs and dwarf roses in beautiful pottery I found at a local artist's studio. For the first time since Manuel died, I wasn't haunted by echoes of what had been. This space was entirely mine, reflecting my current tastes and needs rather than the accumulated compromises of a long marriage and family life. My neighbors were a diverse group, some retirees like me, but also young professionals and middle-aged couples who had downsized early. The building hosted monthly social events, wine tastings, book discussions, movie nights, that provided connection without obligation. Gradually, I built a daily routine that nourished rather than depleted me. Mornings began with coffee on my balcony, watching the community garden below come to life as early risers tended their plots. I attended a painting class twice weekly at the nearby cultural center, surprising myself with a dormant talent for watercolors. Afternoons might include volunteering at the library's literacy program or simply reading in the building's comfortable lobby, exchanging pleasantries with neighbors who quickly became friends. Most surprisingly, I discovered a talent for painting that had lain dormant during my years of prioritizing everyone else's needs. My watercolors started as simple studies of flowers from my container garden, but gradually evolved into more expressive works. My art teacher, Margaret, a retired professor with steel gray hair and an infectious laugh, encouraged me to display my work in the community center's quarterly exhibition. "You have a unique perspective," she told me during one class. "There's wisdom in your brushstrokes, Maria. A depth of feeling that comes from real living." I blushed at her praise, but felt a warm glow of satisfaction that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. This was something I had created purely for myself, an expression of my inner life that required no justification or explanation. "Family estrangement is more common than people realize," said Denise, a woman I met in my painting class who had become a close friend. At 70, she had navigated her own complicated family dynamics after her husband's death a decade earlier. We were sitting in a cafe near the community center, steam rising from our cups as autumn rain tapped against the windows. The greeting card version of family, everyone loving and supportive, gathering for perfect holidays. That's the exception, not the rule, she continued. Most of us are dealing with some level of disappointment or hurt. "I never expected this," I admitted, tracing the rim of my cup with my finger. "Manuel and I tried so hard to raise them with strong values. Where did we go wrong?" Denise's expression softened. "This isn't about your parenting, Maria. Adult children make their own choices. Rebecca, Tyler, Emma, they're responsible for their actions, not you." Her words eased a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged, the nagging sense that I had somehow failed as a mother, that better parenting would have produced more ethical adults. "The hardest part," I confessed, "is the grandchildren. Sophia is 15 now, old enough to have her own phone. She texts me sometimes, but I can tell Rebecca monitors the messages. The younger ones, I wonder if they think I've abandoned them." "That's the cruelest aspect of family rifts," Denise agreed. "The innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. But children are perceptive. As they grow up, they'll form their own opinions about what happened." I nodded, hoping she was right. The thought of my grandchildren believing I had rejected them was almost unbearable. For months after I moved into my condo, Tyler showed up unannounced. Unlike Rebecca's later visit, he came with no warning, no preparation. I nearly didn't recognize him at first. He looked thinner, more careworn than I remembered, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Can I come in?" he asked, shifting uncomfortably in the hallway. I hesitated, then stepped back to allow him entry. We stood awkwardly in my living room, the space suddenly feeling very small. "Nice place," he offered, looking around. "Convenient location." "It suits me," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Would you like some coffee?" He nodded, visibly relieved at having something to do besides stand there. I busied myself in the kitchen, giving us both a moment to collect our thoughts. When I returned with 2 mugs, Tyler was examining one of my paintings hanging on the wall, a watercolor of the rose garden viewed from my balcony, morning light illuminating the petals in shades of gold and pink. "Did you paint this?" he asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "Yes," I said, handing him his coffee. "I've been taking classes." "It's really good, Mom. I had no idea you could paint like this." "Neither did I admitted with a small smile. There were a lot of things I didn't know about myself until recently. We sat on the sofa, an appropriate distance between us, both cradling our mugs as if they might shield us from the uncomfortable conversation ahead. "I left Rachel," he said finally, referring to his wife of 12 years. "Or she left me. It was mutual, I guess." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want my children to suffer. "Yeah, well." He stared into his coffee. "Turns out we weren't very good for each other. She was as invested in the money game as I was, always pushing for more, better, bigger. When that dried up." He trailed off, then looked up at me directly for the first time. I'm not proud of how I behaved, Mom. With you, with the money. It became a kind of addiction, you know? The easy solution to everything. I nodded, encouraging him to continue. After you cut us off, things got real very quickly. Rachel and I had to face our financial situation honestly for the first time in years. It wasn't pretty. We're basically starting over from scratch, massive debt, second mortgage, the works. That must be difficult, I said carefully. He gave a humorless laugh. That's one way of putting it. But you know what's weird? Part of me feels relieved. Like I've been carrying this heavy secret that I can finally put down. No more lies, no more schemes, just the truth. We messed up, and now we have to fix it. I studied my middle child, seeing glimpses of the thoughtful boy he had once been, the one who asked profound questions and worried about fairness, before adult pressures and materialism had reshaped him. It won't be easy, I said. Building financial stability takes time and consistency. Your father and I lived simply for years to create the security you all thought was so easy to achieve. I know that now, Tyler acknowledged. I didn't appreciate it then. We, all of us, took what you and Dad built for granted. Assumed it was our right to benefit from your hard work without contributing anything ourselves. His honesty was refreshing, if painful to hear. I'm not asking for money, he added quickly. That's not why I came. I just wanted to apologize. Face to face. What we did was wrong. What I did was wrong. I'm trying to make different choices now. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet, but a softening, an openness to possibility. I appreciate that, Tyler. It means a lot to hear you say these things. I miss you, Mom, he said, vulnerability cracking his voice. I miss who we were as a family before everything got so twisted. I miss that too, I admitted. But we can't go back to what was. We can only move forward from where we are now. And where is that? He asked, uncertainty in his eyes. I don't know exactly, I said honestly. But I think this conversation is a good start. As Tyler left that day, he paused at the door. Your new place suits you, Mom. You seem different here. Stronger somehow. His observations stayed with me long after he departed. I was different, not just in living situation, but in fundamental ways I was still discovering. The woman who had defined herself primarily as wife, mother, and grandmother was emerging as someone with her own desires, talents, and boundaries. That night, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled over the neighborhood. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine sense of hope about what lay ahead, not just resignation or determination, but actual optimism. My new home wasn't simply a smaller version of my old life. It represented a new beginning, one I had chosen rather than one forced upon me. Whatever happened with my children, whatever relationships we managed to rebuild, I now had a foundation that was truly mine. You have a natural eye for composition, Margaret, my watercolor instructor, commented as she examined my latest painting, a study of light falling through the leaves of a maple tree in the community garden. Most beginners struggle with perspective, but you seem to intuitively understand it. At 72, Margaret Porter had the energy of someone decades younger, with steel gray hair cut in a stylish bob and an impressive collection of artisanal jewelry she crafted herself. After retiring from teaching high school art, she had devoted herself to community education programs and her own creative projects. I've always enjoyed looking at art, I said, slightly embarrassed by her praise. Manuel and I used to visit museums wherever we traveled, but I never thought I could create it myself. That's the tragedy of aging in our culture, Margaret replied, adjusting the angle of my canvas slightly. We're conditioned to believe that creativity belongs to the young, that after a certain age, we should be content to appreciate rather than create. Nothing could be further from the truth. Her words resonated deeply. How many times had I admired something, a painting, a garden design, a piece of music, without ever considering that I might develop similar skills? How often had I deferred to others' talents while ignoring potential abilities of my own? Under Margaret's guidance, my weekly watercolor classes became the highlight of my schedule. The studio space at the community center buzzed with conversation and concentration, populated by students of all ages and skill levels. For 2 hours, I would lose myself completely in the interplay of color and light, the challenges of capturing three-dimensional reality on flat paper, the meditative focus required to control the unpredictable flow of pigment and water. "You're getting quite good," Denise, another student in her 60s, commented one day as we packed up our supplies. "Have you thought about entering something in the community exhibition next month?" The idea terrified and excited me in equal measure. "I'm nowhere near that level," I protested. "Nonsense," Denise replied briskly. "Half the point of the exhibition is showing the journey, not just the destination. Besides, the opening reception has excellent wine and cheese." We laughed, and somehow by the end of the conversation, I had agreed to submit a painting. This casual interaction marked the beginning of a friendship that would become increasingly important in my new life. Denise had been widowed nearly a decade earlier and had navigated many of the challenges I now faced. Unlike my children, who viewed my independence as threatening, she celebrated each small step I took towards self-sufficiency and self-discovery. "Family estrangement is more common than people realize," she told me during one of our post-class coffee sessions. "The greeting card version of family, everyone loving and supportive, gathering for perfect holidays. That's the exception, not the rule. Most of us are dealing with some level of disappointment or hurt." "I never expected this," I admitted, tracing the rim of my cup with my finger. "Manuel and I tried so hard to raise them with strong values. Where did we go wrong?" Denise's expression softened. "This isn't about your parenting, Maria. Adult children make their own choices. Rebecca, Tyler, Emma, they're responsible for their actions, not you." Her words eased a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged, the nagging sense that I had somehow failed as a mother, that better parenting would have produced more ethical adults. As spring turned to summer, my life expanded in ways I wouldn't have imagined possible 6 months earlier. The community garden became a source of both fresh herbs for my kitchen and new friendships with fellow gardeners. I joined a book club that met in the building's common room, finding myself engaged in intellectual discussions I had missed since retiring from teaching elementary school 20 years ago. Most surprising was my growing confidence in navigating practical matters that had once intimidated me. I learned to manage my investments with the help of a financial advisor Elena recommended. I mastered the intricacies of my building's security system and maintenance procedures. I even tackled small repairs in my condo, consulting YouTube tutorials with the same concentration I once reserved for following recipes. "You're blossoming," Elena observed during one of our monthly lunches. "It's like watching a plant that was kept in too small a pot suddenly given room to grow." Her metaphor was apartment. The constraints I had accepted, the limitations I had placed on myself and allowed others to reinforce, had indeed kept me from flourishing. Now, with those constraints removed, I was discovering capacities I hadn't known I possessed. One Thursday evening, returning from my watercolor class with a completed painting I was particularly proud of, I found Emma's husband Stephen waiting in the lobby of my building. "Your daughter sent me," he said without preamble. "She's concerned about your erratic behavior." The confrontational tone immediately put me on guard. "My behavior isn't erratic, Stephen. It's simply independent of your and Emma's control." His expression tightened. "You've cut off your family, moved without telling anyone where you were going, and are apparently spending money on frivolous hobbies instead of helping your children and grandchildren. Emma is worried about your mental state." I looked at this man, my son-in-law of 12 years, and saw him clearly, perhaps for the first time. The charm that had once seemed sophisticated now appeared calculated. The confidence I had admired now registered as arrogance. The concern he expressed for my well-being was transparently self-serving. "Stephen," I said calmly, "I haven't cut off my family emotionally. I've established financial boundaries and made decisions about my living situation that suit my needs. If Emma is genuinely concerned about my well-being rather than her access to my resources, she's welcome to call or visit herself." "She's too hurt by your rejection," he countered. "You've broken her heart with your selfishness." The accusation might once have devastated me, triggering immediate guilt and conciliation. Now, it simply reinforced the righteousness of my decisions. "I'm sorry Emma sees it that way," I replied. "When she's ready to have an honest conversation about what really happened, my door is open to her. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's been a long day." I moved toward the elevator, but Stephen stepped into my path. "We're not finished here. Emma and I have consulted with an attorney about your competency. If you continue this irrational behavior, we may have no choice but to seek guardianship for your own protection." The threat was so outrageous it almost made me laugh. "Almost. I suggest you speak with your attorney about the legal standards for competency," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "My financial decisions are sound, my living situation is appropriate, and I have extensive documentation of the systematic financial exploitation that preceded my current actions. Additionally, my own attorney has arranged for independent psychological evaluation confirming my competency. So, unless you'd like to discuss this further with security," I gestured toward the front desk where the evening guard was watching our interaction with concern, "I'll say good night." Stephen's face flushed with anger, but he stepped aside. As the elevator doors closed between us, I released a shaky breath. The confrontation had been unpleasant but clarifying. Emma and Stephen weren't simply hurt or confused. They were actively hostile to my independence. That evening, I called Elena to report the encounter. "I think I need to formally document these interactions," I said after relating the details. "Absolutely," she agreed. "This kind of threat is serious, even if they have no legal grounds. I'll contact the attorney who handled your competency evaluation and have her prepare a response should they actually file anything." The incident left me shaken but resolute. I was no longer the easily manipulated woman my children had exploited. I had resources, not just financial, but emotional and intellectual, to protect myself and the life I was building. The following week, I submitted my watercolor of the community garden to the local exhibition. When Margaret called to tell me it had been accepted, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I'd experienced in years. This achievement was entirely mine, not as someone's wife or mother, but as an artist in my own right. At the opening reception, standing beside my framed painting with its small identifying placard, "Garden Light" by Maria Blanco, I experienced a profound sense of rightness. This new chapter of my life, though born from painful revelations and difficult choices, was authentic in a way my existence hadn't been since Manuel's death. Perhaps, I realized with the start, in ways it hadn't been even before that loss. "To new beginnings," Denise said, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of the promised wine. "To new beginnings," I echoed, meaning it with all my heart.
Mom.
"You've done a beautiful job with this. I had no idea you were so talented." Rebecca's voice contained genuine admiration as she examined the watercolor hanging on my living room wall, a study of the sunrise viewed from my balcony, the city skyline bathed in golden light. 3 months had passed since my confrontation with Stephen. In that time, Tyler had become a regular visitor, gradually rebuilding our relationship through consistent, respectful interaction. But this was Rebecca's first visit to my new home, a tentative step toward reconciliation that had taken weeks of careful communication to arrange. "Thank you," I replied, watching her explore the space with curious eyes. The painting classes have been wonderful. I wish I discovered this passion years ago. Rebecca nodded, moving to examine the photos displayed on my bookshelf, a carefully curated collection of family moments that acknowledged our shared past without dwelling in it. You look happy in these recent ones, she said, picking up a frame that held a picture of me with Denise and Margaret at the art exhibition opening. More relaxed than I remember seeing you in a long time. I am happy, I confirmed. It took some difficult changes to get here, but I'm grateful for where I am now. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. We were both avoiding the central issue, the betrayal that had fractured our relationship, the painful truths that remained unaddressed. Finally, Rebecca turned to face me directly. I owe you an apology, Mom. What you overheard that day, it was inexcusable. I waited, giving her space to continue. David and I have separated, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. After you cut us off financially, things got tense between us. We started fighting about money constantly. One night, he admitted he'd been gambling online for years. We're in serious debt, Mom. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. The kids' college funds are empty. Part of me felt vindicated, so there was a reason for their increasing desperation for my money. Another part ached for her, for my grandchildren whose futures were now uncertain. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. I would have helped if I could. Not funded an Aspen vacation, perhaps, but helped with what was necessary. Rebecca's face crumpled. I was ashamed. David convinced me that we deserved your money, and that taking care of us was your obligation. The more he spent, the more we needed, and the easier it became to justify taking rather than asking. I nodded, understanding the slow erosion of ethics that can happen in desperate situations. I'm not asking for money, Mom, she added quickly. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I miss you. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't undo the pain or rebuild trust instantly. But it was a start. I miss you too, I admitted. And I worry about the children. How are they handling the separation? Rebecca's expression softened at the mention of her children. It's been hard. Sophia is angry at both of us. Michael is confused. They miss their routine, their home. We're in a small apartment now, and everything feels temporary. Would they like to visit here sometime? I offered. Not to stay. There isn't space, but perhaps for dinner or an afternoon? They'd love that, Rebecca said, hope flickering across her face. They talk about you all the time. Especially Sophia. She keeps that watercolor butterfly you painted for her birthday on her bedside table. The mention of my granddaughter brought a lump to my throat. Sophia had been just 8 when Manuel died, devastated by the loss of her beloved grandfather. Now 15, she was facing another family upheaval. I wished I could shelter her from these adult complexities, these consequences of choices made before she was even born. Bring them next weekend, I suggested. I'll make paella. Manuel's recipe that they always loved. Rebecca nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. Thank you for being willing to try again. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see any of us again. You're my daughter, I said simply. That hasn't changed. What's changed is that I now require honesty and respect in all my relationships, including with my children. As Rebecca prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. Have you heard from Emma? Not directly, I replied. Stephen confronted me in the lobby a few months ago, with vague threats about challenging my competency. Elena handled the legal response. Since then, silence. Rebecca shook her head. She and Stephen are in deep denial about their financial situation. They're leveraged to the hilt. Massive mortgage, luxury car loans, credit card debt. When you stopped being their safety net, everything started to unravel. But instead of facing reality, they're doubling down, insisting they're fine while charging everything to already maxed out credit cards. I sighed, recognizing the pattern. She'll have to find her own way through this. I can't fix it for her, especially when she refuses to acknowledge there's a problem. I know, Rebecca agreed. I've tried talking to her, but she shuts me down immediately. Claims I've betrayed the family by reconnecting with you. The knowledge that my youngest child remained so entrenched in her anger and entitlement brought a familiar ache. But it was a pain I now knew how to carry, acknowledging its presence without allowing it to overwhelm the joy and peace I'd fought so hard to establish. After Rebecca left, I called Tyler to update him on our conversation. His relationship with his sisters had become strained in the aftermath of our family rupture, with each navigating their own path through the consequences of their actions. I'm glad she finally came around, he said. Rebecca's had it rough since David left. She's working 2 jobs trying to keep the kids in their schools. She didn't mention that, I said, concerned. She wouldn't. Pride runs deep in this family, in case you hadn't noticed, Tyler replied with a hint of his old humor. Some of us are just learning to balance it with honesty. The following weekend, Rebecca arrived with Sophia and Michael, both showing the cautious excitement of children unsure what to expect. Michael, at 12, immediately gravitated to my small balcony garden, asking questions about each plant and volunteering that he'd join the ecology club at school. Sophia, more reserved at 15, examined my paintings with critical interest. These are really good, Abuela, she said finally, using the Spanish endearment she had adopted as a small child. You should have an Instagram for your art. Her suggestion made me laugh. I'm not sure I'm ready for social media yet. One step at a time. I could help you set it up, she offered. It's super easy, and then people could see her work. The simple interaction, her offering expertise, me accepting help, felt like a crucial reconnection, a bridge across the chasm that had formed between generations. As we gathered around my small dining table for paella and conversation, I felt a tentative hope taking root. This wasn't the boisterous family gathering of years past, with everyone talking over each other and Manuel presiding at the head of the table. It was something new, more measured, more intentional, shaped by hard-earned wisdom on all sides. Tyler joined us for dessert, bringing a flan he had purchased from the Cuban bakery we all loved. The cousins greeted each other warmly, falling into the easy banter of shared history despite the months of separation. Watching them, I realized that family, true family, is not a static entity but a living, evolving relationship. It can be damaged, sometimes severely, but it can also heal if tended with care, honesty, and appropriate boundaries. The empty chair at the table, the absence neither acknowledged nor ignored, reminded us that healing remained incomplete. Emma's decision to maintain her distance was a wound we all carried, though in different ways. For the children, it meant missing cousins they had grown up alongside. For Rebecca and Tyler, it represented a fracture in sibling bonds that had once seemed unbreakable. For me, it was the price of self-respect, a consequence I accepted with sadness, but without regret. As the evening concluded with promises of future gatherings, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for perfect reconciliation or happily ever after resolutions, but for the honest connections we were slowly rebuilding. The path forward remained uncertain, marked by both possibility and limitation. But for the first time in years, it felt like a path we were choosing together, with clear vision and mutual respect. Later that night, alone in my peaceful home, I looked at the family photograph from Emma's wedding 5 years earlier that I had finally felt ready to display. Everyone smiling, Manuel still healthy, my arm linked through his. Were those smiles genuine then? Had something fundamental changed, or had I simply been blind to undercurrents that existed all along? Perhaps it didn't matter anymore. The past could not be rewritten, only understood and accepted. What mattered was the present moment and the future we were creating choice by choice, day by day. I touched Manuel's face in the photograph, feeling that familiar ache of missing him mixed with the comfort of his enduring presence in my heart. I wish you could see how far we've come, I whispered. How far I've come. Somewhere in the night, I imagined I could hear his reply. I see you, mi vida.
I've always seen you.
Garden Light by Maria Blanco. Oil on canvas. $3,500. I stood motionless, staring at the small red that had been placed beside the placard, the universal signal that a painting had been sold. My painting.
Sold.
To a stranger who had connected with my vision enough to pay actual money for it. Congratulations, Margaret said, appearing beside me at the Community Arts Center's quarterly exhibition. How does it feel to be a professional artist? Surreal, I admitted. I never expected this. You underestimate yourself, she replied with a knowing smile. You always have, I suspect. She was right. For decades, I had defined my worth through my utility to others, as Manuel's wife, as my children's mother, as my grandchildren's grandmother. The idea that something I created purely for my own satisfaction might have independent value was revolutionary. The buyer, a young woman with vibrant blue hair and multiple earrings, approached me later. I love the emotion in your work, she said. There's a vulnerability, but also a strength in how you capture light. It feels authentic. Her insight stunned me. That was exactly what I had been trying to capture. The duality of experience, the complexity of a life fully lived, with all its contradictions and layers. That a stranger could see this, could connect with my most personal expression, felt like magic. 1 year had passed since that fateful phone call when Rebecca forgot to hang up. 1 year of profound transformation, painful reckonings, and unexpected joy. As I looked around the gallery at my fellow artists and their gathered supporters, I marveled at the journey that had brought me here, not just to this exhibition, but to this version of myself. Confident, creative, and unapologetically authentic. Ready for our celebration dinner? Denise asked, linking her arm through mine as the exhibition began winding down. Our tradition of post-opening meals had become a cherished ritual, a moment to decompress and reflect on our artistic progress. Absolutely, I agreed. Though we should invite the artist with the reds beside all 3 of her pieces. Jennifer deserves to celebrate even more than I do. Already asked her, Denise confirmed. She'll meet us at the restaurant. Elena's joining too. She just texted that she finished her court appearance early. The easy coordination of friendship, the casual inclusion and genuine support, still felt like gifts I was learning to accept without question or guilt. My circle had expanded in ways I never anticipated, enriching my life with perspectives and experiences I would have missed had I remained isolated in my role as family matriarch. At the restaurant, a cozy Italian place that had become our favorite, we claimed a corner table perfect for lingering conversation. Jennifer, in her early 30s, brought a youthful energy that balanced the seasoned wisdom of our older group. Elena arrived with news of her latest legal triumph, her passion for elder advocacy undiminished after decades of practice. To Maria's first sale, Denise proposed once our wine had been poured. May it be the first of many. And to new chapters, Elena added, her gaze meeting mine with understanding. Beautifully composed and authentically lived. The conversation flowed easily, touching on art techniques, community events, books we'd recently enjoyed. No one demanded emotional labor from me. No one required caretaking or management. I was simply Maria, artist, friend, woman of experience with stories and insights to share. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Congrats on the sale. Kids send their love. Dinner at my place Sunday still on. I smiled, typing a quick confirmation. The weekly family dinners had become a healing ritual, rotating between my condo, Tyler's apartment, and occasionally Rebecca's place, when her work schedule allowed. The gatherings were smaller than in years past, with Emma and Stephen still maintaining their distance, but they were genuine in a way our previous interactions had not been. Rebecca's journey toward honesty and accountability continued to unfold in fits and starts. The practical challenges of single parenthood while managing crushing debt sometimes overwhelmed her best intentions. But she was trying, and that effort meant everything. Tyler had found unexpected purpose in his financial rebuilding, developing a workshop for other families facing similar challenges. "Everything I learned the hard way," he explained when describing the project. "Maybe it will help someone else avoid our mistakes." My grandchildren had shown remarkable resilience through all the changes. Sophia, now 16, had developed a keen interest in photography, often bringing her camera to our family gatherings to document what she called our new normal. Michael had discovered a talent for cooking, apprenticing himself to whoever was preparing the meal with earnest concentration. Even Manuel's sister Carmela, who had maintained a careful neutrality during the family conflict, had re-established regular contact, calling weekly for conversations that ranged from family gossip to theological debates about the afterlife. The empty chair at our table, Emma's absence, remained a sorrow we acknowledged without allowing it to overshadow our healing connections. I had continued sending cards for birthdays and holidays, maintaining an open door that she had not yet chosen to enter. Perhaps someday she would. Perhaps not. I had learned to hold that uncertainty with grace rather than anxiety. After dinner, I returned home to my condo filled with paintings in various stages of completion. The space reflected my current reality, organized but not rigid, artistic but functional, carefully curated to contain only what brought me joy or served a purpose. The morning light would flood the east-facing windows, illuminating my easel where a new canvas awaited, a blank possibility I approached now with excitement rather than intimidation. I had discovered that creativity, like courage, grows with practice. Each painting taught me something about technique, about patience, about the interplay of intention and surrender. The same could be said for rebuilding a life after loss and betrayal. There was no perfect formula, no guaranteed outcome, only the daily choice to engage fully with whatever the canvas presented. The woman who had once defined herself entirely through her relationships to others now recognized herself as complete and worthy independent of those roles. I still treasured my connections as mother, grandmother, friend, but they no longer constituted the entirety of my identity. They were threads in a tapestry that had become richer, more complex, and ultimately more beautiful than I could have imagined. At 65, I had discovered that reinvention wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Not as a rejection of my past, but as an embrace of a future uniquely mine to shape. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been days of doubt, of grief, of longing for the simpler path of accommodation and self-denial. But those moments had become less frequent, less overwhelming, as my confidence in my new direction grew. Standing on my balcony that evening, watching the city lights flicker on as darkness settled, I felt a profound sense of peace. Not the passive peace of resignation, but the earned tranquility of someone who has faced difficult truths and found strength in their acceptance. "You would be proud of me, Manuel," I whispered to the night sky. "I finally understood what you were trying to tell me." In the gentle breeze that ruffled the leaves of my potted herbs, I imagined his response. "I always was proud, mi vida. I always knew who you could be." Life remains unpredictable, filled with challenges we can neither anticipate nor control. What we can control is how we respond, whether we face truth with courage or retreat into comfortable illusion, whether we define ourselves by others' expectations or claim the authority to write our own story. My daughter forgot to press the end button on a phone call, and in doing so, accidentally revealed a painful truth that changed everything. But the greater revelation was what I discovered about myself in the aftermath, my capacity for difficult decisions, for new beginnings, for joy independent of external validation. I am Maria Blanco, and at 65, I am finally living for myself, painting my days in colors of my own choosing. The canvas of my remaining years is mine to fill. No longer a background for others' desires, but a work of art in its own right, vibrant with possibility, rich with hard-won wisdom. If my journey has touched you in any way, please subscribe to Stories for Her for more narratives of women finding their strength when it matters most. Remember, it's never too late to stand in your truth. It's never too late to begin again. What new beginning are you contemplating today? Drop a comment below.